ලසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, new compromise. The president tells the Mahanayakas that he is ready for an interim government amidst claims that 120 parliamentarians support the no-confidence vote. Lifted up. China's envoy says that without Chinese help, Sri Lanka would have hit a crisis years before.
To be very frank, without China's support, Sri Lanka cannot achieve the current success to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, the economic and the financial crisis might have already happened years ago.
Self-reflection. The Cardinal holds Mass at the Vatican calling for Easter attack justice, the government to accept their mistakes and seek forgiveness from the people. A slippery slope. The Colombo Stock Exchange pulls the emergency brake once again after the S&P SL20 nosedives. All this and much more coming up on First at 9 this Monday, the 25th of April, 2022.
100ක් දක්වා ඉසොරි නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලමක් ලබා දේ. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Bringing you the latest from across the island, this is First at 9 and I'm David Ebert. Now, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has written to the chief prelates of the three Buddhist sects in the country, expressing his willingness to appoint an interim government. However, former Minister Udayagaman says that 120 MPs stand ready to vote for the opposition's no-confidence motion, which may be brought in this week if the government doesn't resign. In a letter to the chief prelates of the three Buddhist chapters, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has stated that he agrees to the formation of an interim government, the registrar of the Askiriya chapter, Venerable Madagama Dhammananda Thera, said today. He stated that the president has also assured that he will take immediate steps to resolve the economic crisis in the country afterwards. The president in his letter to the chief prelates has also said that any constitutional reforms must be carried out only through parliament. The Venerable Madagama Dhammananda Thera added that the president has emphasized that the economic problems and the crisis situation would be eliminated and the welfare of the people would be ensured as requested by the Mahanayaka Theras. The letter was handed over to the chief prelates of the Malvathuwa and Askiriya chapters yesterday. On the 4th of April, the chief prelates to the three chapters had sent a letter to the president regarding the current situation in the country, which also included several proposals to be implemented. In the meantime, former Minister Udayagaman says that there are currently 120 parliamentarians who believe that the incumbent government must resign and have warned that the no-confidence motion against the government would be tabled within a week if it fails to resign soon. Speaking during a press briefing in Colombo today, Gaman said that the group had asked the Samagi Jana Balawegaya to wait for a while until they gathered the required 113 MPs to support its no-confidence motion. However, he revealed that they now have the backing of around 120 parliamentarians. The MP said that at present they have prepared a very simple draft for a no-confidence motion against the government and discussed it with the Samagi Jana Balawegaya and the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. He stated that the two opposition parties have given their consent regarding the contents of the motion. He warned that if the government does not resign in the near future, the no-confidence motion will definitely be handed over within this week. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Workers' Congress announced that after extensive discussions, it has decided to vote against the present government and that the decision has been communicated to the party leaders of the ruling party, the opposition and the independent group. Meanwhile, China's ambassador to Sri Lanka, Chi Zhenhong, says that China stands willing to help Sri Lanka out through its crisis, but IMF debt restructuring could have an impact on further Chinese loans to the island. Speaking to media personnel today, the envoy added that many nations have underestimated Chinese assistance to Sri Lanka, which has come in many forms, and says that Sri Lanka's crisis would have come upon the country years earlier if not for China's help. Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Chi Zhenhong, met with members of the media today to share his views on a range of subjects with regard to Sri Lanka and China. Beginning with Chinese assistance to Sri Lanka, the Chinese envoy said that what has been seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg.
In my personal opinion, I believe there are much more potential we can do in between our two countries. Number one, definitely, is to overcome the current difficulties. That is, there's some loans, financial support. But I believe there are more we should do in terms of the future, because we have to have a long-term vision about the situation, how we can get over this crisis and to resume the sustainable development of the country. And in this regard, China can make a great contribution to Sri Lanka in a long-term way. Chinese side has the willingness as well as the ability to have the cooperation in all the fields with Sri Lanka. And also, including the FTA negotiation, we could resume negotiation on the free trade agreement. We believe that the FTA will be very helpful for Sri Lanka to overcome the current difficulties and to achieve a long-term development. I have reiterated many times with our media friends, there's no private agenda for China on this part.
Speaking on Sri Lanka's International Monetary Fund negotiations for a bailout, the envoy explained that taking the historical example, any bailout comes with strict conditions, and that it was still too early to gauge how debt restructuring would impact on Chinese loans.
According to the experience in the past, all the countries who have decided to receive IMF support, the bailout will have to have very strict restrictions on the loans and also all the other financial structures. So at this stage, to be very frank, I cannot tell you what impact will it be to the loans from China to Sri Lanka. I can assure Sri Lanka friends is that under the current difficult situation, when Sri Lanka are in the urgent need, China will continue all our support, including the investment to Sri Lanka, to help Sri Lanka to get out of the difficulties. Especially the important issue is that we need to help Sri Lanka to increase its own ability for the self-development. The debt restructuring is a very important part in the negotiation between Sri Lanka and IMF. Let's wait and see how the negotiation will be concluded.
The envoy also highlighted what he termed an unfair portrayal of Chinese help to the island, which he explained is a bit more than just skin deep and has helped Sri Lanka delay its economic impact. The envoy explained that Chinese culture is one that shies away from doling out assistance and then causing an embarrassment to its friends.
What China have done is actually much more than its numbers. Everybody now is talking about the fuel shortage, but actually from last year, July last year until January this year, the PetroChina has supplied Sri Lanka, the CPC, with the most economic price with 19 ships of diesels and petrol, which has been a huge support for Sri Lanka to overcome the difficulty for the last half year. And within these 19 ships, the total amount is about 730,000 tons. It's a huge amount. And only 7 ships has been paid, and another 12 ships are still not paid. The outstanding is about almost $400 million.
$390 million.
Yeah, and the second reason that actually, according to the Chinese culture, we always want to be the low profile, and we don't want to embarrass our Sri Lanka friends, our friends.
Because we are good friends, and this is a critical moment. We don't want to make our Sri Lanka friends embarrassing. This is our tradition, our culture tradition.
I feel actually very unfair to learn from some foreign media, not in Sri Lanka. Some foreign media, they have criticized China, didn't help Sri Lanka. But to be very frank, without China's support, the country, Sri Lanka, cannot achieve the current success to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, the crisis of the economic and the financial crisis might have already happened years ago.
A special mass was held today at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican City in Rome by Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, invoking blessings on those who suffered dearly during the Easter Sunday massacre of 2019. Delivering the homily at the Mass, President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Sri Lanka, Right Reverend Dr. Winston Fernando, called on the leaders of Sri Lanka to be humble and honest and seek the forgiveness of the people if they have committed a mistake. Further, Reverend Dr. Fernando also condemned the Sri Lankan government's attempts to hide the truth behind these attacks from the people.
A special mass was held at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome today to bless all those who died, suffered injuries and lost loved ones during the Easter Sunday terror attacks. The mass, which began at 10 a.m. at the Vatican, was presided over by Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit. The mass was also attended by a group of Sri Lankan bishops along with 35 family members of the victims of the Easter Sunday attacks. Further, hundreds of members of the Sri Lankan community in Italy too joined in the service.
The Sri Lankan Catholic community and also of the other religions living in Italy are gathered together in this beautiful Basilica of St. Peter to show our solidarity with all those who suffered as a result of the Easter Sunday bombings 3 years ago on 21st April 2019. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Sri Lanka has decided to join His Holiness in commemorating these dead and those injured. Let us pray to the Lord to bless us and to strengthen us and to ensure that the truth concerning these attacks is known to us.
Meanwhile, President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Sri Lanka, Right Reverend Dr. Winston Fernando, delivered the homily.
පාස්කු ඉරිදින ප්‍රහාරය සම්බන්ධයෙන් සත්‍ය මත පදනම් වූ සාධාරණය සහ යුක්තියට කිරීමේ සටනකයි අපි යෙදී සිටින්නේ. ශ්‍රී ලංකා රජය සත්‍ය වසන් කිරීමේ කල්මැරීමේ හා ජනතාව රැවටීමේ ක්‍රියාවලියක යෙදී සිටීම අප දැඩිසේ හෙලා දකිනවා. මනාව සැලසුම් කළ මහා මිනිස් සංහාරයක් දැන දැනම රටේ පාලකයන් නොවැළැක්වීම මොන අපරාධයක්ද? ඒ වගේම අහිංසක දූ දරුවෝ ඇතුළු දෙමාපිය වැඩිහිටි පවුල් පිටින් ඝාතනය කිරීමේදී එයින් දේශපාලන වාසි ලබා ගැනීමට ක්‍රියා කළා නම් ඒ වරදක් බව තීරණය කරන්නට නීති පොත බලන්නට හෝ රටේ ව්‍යවස්ථාව උල්ලංඝනය කළාදැයි ප්‍රශ්න කිරීමට හෝ යෑම මනුෂ්‍යත්වයට සරදම් කිරීමක් නිග්‍රහාවක්. පාස්කු ඉරිදෙන ප්‍රහාරයේ වින්දිතයන්ට සහ සෙසු සමාජයට සත්‍ය හෙළි නොකිරීමේ හා යුක්තිය ඉටු නොකිරීමේ ආදිනව දැන් අප රටේ උද්ගත වී ඇති අරගලයෙන් දැක ගැනීමට පුළුවන්. අපි ආරාධනා කරනවා එම නිසා අප රටේ ජනනායකයින්ට නිහතමානීව අවංකව සත්‍යගරුකව තමන්ගෙන් වරදක් වුණා නම් ඒ වරද පිළිගෙන ජනතාව ඉදිරියේ ඒ සමාව ලබාගෙන ජීවත් වන්නටයි කියලා.
Following this, the rituals of the Mass were carried out by His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit.
මාසී කිරීම පිණිස මෙය සිදු කරන්න. සියලු බලැති දෙවි මහෝත්තමයාණන් වන යානෝද පුත්‍රයානෝද සුදාත්මයානෝද ඔබ ආශිර්වාද කරන සේක්වා.
Following the conclusion of the Mass, His Holiness Pope Francis arrived at St. Peter's Basilica and blessed the families of the victims of the Easter Sunday terror attacks. In order to commemorate the special occasion, the Cardinal also presented a statue of the risen Lord to Pope Francis. In the meantime, speaking to AdaDerana, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit said that they will continue the struggle until the truth behind the Easter Sunday attacks are brought to light.
දැන් අවුරුදු 3ක් වෙනවා මේක සිද්ධ වෙලා. තාමත් අපිට සත්‍යතාවය සහ යුක්තිය ඉෂ්ට කරගන්න බැරි වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපි මේ ආරයට ගොදුරු වෙච්ච කණ්ඩායම රෝමයට කැඳවාගෙන ආවා. ඒ අයව සුද්ධෝත්තම පාපවංශයට අඳුන්වා දෙන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. මේක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම අපට එලිදරව් කරන තුරු මේ අරගලේ අපි නතර කරන්නේ නැහැයි කියන එක පෙන්වන්න තමයි මේ දේ කරන්නේ.
And we'll be back with more local news right after this short break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Ugandan corporate Serenity Group has issued a new statement denying claims of investments in the company belonging to Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. The statement rejects that it has not received any investments from any Sri Lankan politicians.
Ugandan corporate Serenity Group that was alleged to hold investments running into $1 billion belonging to Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has released an official statement denying the claims. In its statement, Serenity Group Director Ruwan Jayaratne says that while the company is aware of multiple stories that have been circulating on social media platforms regarding to its founders, operations and business profile, no such truth exists to the claims. He adds that while the country is clearly undergoing a tremendous challenging time, the people's struggles is legitimate, that their grievances are undeniable and the questions are sincere, and in this regard, Serenity Group is open to support any legitimate investigation. He categorically denies that it has received investments or financial support from politicians or the government of Sri Lanka. Further, Jayaratne adds that the company hopes that its attempts to share its story will help the general public to get a better grasp of the situation and answer many of the burning questions that have been fueled by the low-trust environment. He explains that Serenity Group was set up to follow our business interests in securing supply and construction contracts in rural electrification projects through a subsidiary named Nile Heavy Engineering Limited. He adds that the company also entered the F&B sector with two establishments, Cafe Ceylon and Bakehouse, which during an official visit to Uganda, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa visited Cafe Ceylon. He explains further that the company divested itself from its F&B business in 2020 and that all subsidiaries have been openly and proudly displayed on the company's website. Jayaratne adds that the Serenity Group and its subsidiaries had an organic growth since its inception and provided employment for many Sri Lankan and Ugandans and will proudly continue to support Sri Lanka through a steady flow of foreign remittances into the country.
Now, the Fourth Magistrates Court has issued another foreign travel ban on former Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Ajit Niwat Cabral. Fourth Magistrate Tirina Gamage issued the order today after taking into consideration a personal complaint filed by Venerable Tiniyavala Palithatera accusing Cabral of misappropriating state funds while serving as the central bank governor. The court also issued summons on Cabral to appear before the court on the 7th of June 2022. President's Counsel Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, appearing on behalf of the complainant, informed the court that during his tenure as the central bank governor from 2006 to 2015, Cabral had paid a sum of $6.5 million to an American national without cabinet approval and thereby was responsible for criminal breach of trust and criminal abuse of funds. After considering the facts presented, the court issued a directive barring the former CBSL governor from leaving the country. On the 18th of April, the Colombo Additional Magistrate had also imposed a travel ban on Cabral. Now, the Bar Association drew the attention of the police and the government on the certain barricades with spikes that had been set up in fort yesterday, among others, to deter the protest march carried out by the inter-university students. The association said that the police and armed forces are duty-bound to ensure the safety of protesters and their right to dissent peacefully.
The dire economic situation in Sri Lanka and the rising costs of living has sparked countless anti-government protests across the country for the past 2 weeks, as the people continuously urge the government and the president to resign immediately. The heart of the struggle at Goldface Green saw its struggle reach day 17 today, since it started on the 9th of this month. The protest at the Goldface Green continues to attract people of all stature, class and creed, and continues to be the endpoint of many of the protests that are carried out in Colombo. One such protest was the one carried out by the Inter-University Students' Federation yesterday. The protest, which started in fort yesterday, had ended at the Goldface Green after the large number of students peacefully engaged in expressing their dissent in front of the Prime Minister's residence at Vijayarama Mawatha yesterday. Following the conclusion of the protest, the police took measures to remove the barricades that had been set up on multiple roads around Fort and the Presidential Secretariat in order to allow a seamless flow of traffic today. However, the Bar Association issued a statement yesterday saying that the attention of the BSL and the public has been placed on pictures and visuals of barricades set up with hidden spikes, saying that such barricades could cause serious injury to the protesters. As such, the association called on the government, the Inspector General of Police, and all police officers and the armed forces to act with utmost restraint in all circumstances. The BSL reminded that it is the duty of the police and the armed forces to ensure the safety of the protesters and the public, and the right of the people to dissent in a peaceful manner, and also the freedom of movement of the country's citizens. Meanwhile, a protest was worked off today by the National Tourist Drivers Association. They carried out a protest march from the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority located in Kolpeti and proceeded to the Golfers Green. In the meantime, the Association of Technical Services Joint Professionals joined the protest at the Golfers Green today as well. The protesters also called for the government to provide solutions to the worsening economic situation as well.
An island-wide sick leave strike was carried out today by many teacher and principal trade unions that disregarded the request by the Education Minister to report to school as normal. The Ceylon Teachers Union says that if the government continues to fail to provide a solution to the current economic situation, a mass strike will be carried out on Thursday, the 28th of April.
Many teacher and principal trade unions announced yesterday that they will carry out a sick leave strike today. Despite this, Minister of Education Dr. Ramesh Patirana said today that school activities will continue as normal, as he believed that the teachers would report to schools today. The Minister of Education also said that although it is the right of teachers to carry out trade union struggles, he urged them to consider the school children and report to schools today. Despite these calls, the strike was carried out. Due to this, many students did not attend school. Many of the students that attended school enjoyed continuous free periods throughout the day. As such, some of the students had gone home as well. In the meantime, some teachers were seen at post offices reporting sick leave to their respective schools. Meanwhile, a group of teachers in the Kaluthara district engaged in a protest march from the Katakurunda town to Nagas Handhiya today. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Teachers Union says that if the government continues to fail to resolve the crisis, a mass protest will be carried out on Thursday, the 20th of April. They urge the government and the president to heed the voices of the people and go home immediately.
Now, the stock market did not get off to a great start today as it opened for the first time after closing on the 15th of April, as the S&P SL 20 of more liquid stocks dipped past 10%, leading to the market halting for the day.
The Colombo stock market opened for the first time today after the Securities and Exchange Commission ordered for the Colombo Stock Exchange to close for 5 days, starting from the 18th until the 22nd of April. The SEC had ordered for the closure of the market in order to allow the investors to fully comprehend the situation of the market and the country. However, the market performance was not great today, as the index plummeted past 10%. Trading at the stock market was closed for the day after the S&P SL 20 of more liquid stocks fell over 10% today. The SPI was down by 500 points at 7,593.39 as soon as the market opened. The day's turnover meanwhile was 265 million rupees, nearly a quarter of this year's average daily turnover of 4.6 billion rupees.
Welcome back. According to the World Health Organization, a dozen countries have reported acute hepatitis of unknown reasons among children. However, none of the reported cases have detected the 5 common hepatitis viruses.
The World Health Organization announced that 12 countries have reported acute hepatitis of unknown reasons among children, with at least one death. In a statement, the WHO said that at least 169 cases of acute hepatitis among children had been reported, 114 of whom in Britain. Similar cases has also been reported in the United States, Spain, Israel, Denmark and other countries. The patients range from 1 month to 16 years old, and 17 of them require liver transplants. However, none of the reported cases have detected the 5 common hepatitis viruses. Meanwhile, symptoms of many reported cases include diarrhea and vomiting, and most cases do not exhibit a fever. However, as the vast majority of the patients had not been vaccinated against COVID-19, it is accepted that the hepatitis variant is not a side effect of a COVID-19 vaccination. The WHO stated that it is monitoring the situation closely and working in cooperation with the UK Health Department and other partners.
Emmanuel Macron has won France's presidential election, fending off a historic challenge from far-right candidate Marine Le Pen during yesterday's runoff vote, heading off a political earthquake for Europe. However, victory for Macron makes him the first French president to be re-elected in 20 years.
French incumbent President Emmanuel Macron won the 2022 French presidential runoff with 18,779,641 votes, or 58.5% of the valid votes, according to results released early Monday by the French Interior Ministry. Macron's rival, far-right-wing candidate Marine Le Pen, gained 13,297,760 votes, or 41.5%. The minister said that among the approximately 48,752,500 citizens who registered to vote, 35,096,391 voters cast their ballots during the runoff, representing a turnout of 72%. However, Macron is the first French president to win a second term in 20 years. President Macron and Le Pen advanced to the runoff after finishing in first and second place respectively, among 12 candidates who ran in the first round on April 10th. Despite her loss, Le Pen said her significant vote share still marked a victory. Marine Le Pen took over the party founded by her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, in 2011 in a bid to make it electable. She won more than 13 million votes yesterday on a platform of tax cuts to tackle the high cost of living, a ban on wearing the Muslim headscarf in public, and a referendum on immigration controls. During his victory speech, Macron said that an answer must be found to the anger and disagreements that led many of the compatriots to vote for the extreme right, adding that it will be his responsibility and that of those around him to do so. While the contest was a rematch of the 2017 French presidential runoff, much of Europe watched the election with unease. Macron's victory was welcomed by relieved European leaders who had feared a far-right candidate offering a series of anti-EU policies. United States President Joe Biden hailed Macron's victory, calling France is the United States' oldest ally, a key partner in addressing global challenges. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the public face of Brexit, for many Europeans applauded the result, pledging cooperation with Macron, calling France one of UK's closest and most important allies. On Twitter, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called Macron a true friend of Ukraine.
As the Russia-Ukraine war enters its 61st day today, Ukrainian officials announced that several attacks were carried out throughout the country by Russian military forces. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who made an unannounced trip to Kyiv yesterday, held bilateral discussions with the Ukrainian president and other officials.
Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak yesterday announced that Russian forces were continuously attacking the encircled Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol on Easter Sunday, Orthodox Easter 2022. But right now the Russian Federation is continuously attacking the Mariupol Azovstal steel factory, he said on Twitter. Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed earlier this week that Russian forces had achieved the liberation of Mariupol, but ordered his forces to stop short of taking the Azovstal plant, the last major bastion of the Ukrainian defense in the city. As the barrage of Mariupol continues, the city's sprawling Azovstal steel plant has become one of the largest significant holdouts of Ukrainian forces. In this backdrop, Russia's Ministry of Defense has offered a cease of all hostilities around the Azovstal steel plant in besieged Mariupol to allow citizens to leave in any directions they choose. The statement also claimed a permanently operating round-the-clock humanitarian corridor would be open for the evacuations of civilian plant workers, women and children. However, the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister announced today that no agreement on a corridor had been reached with Russia for the evacuation of civilians from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. I declare officially and publicly. Unfortunately, there are no agreements on humanitarian corridors from Azovstal today. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials have said Russia has repeatedly broken pledges to allow civilians safe passage from Azovstal. US and Ukrainian forces have also alleged that Russian forces have forced civilians looking to escape Mariupol into separatist-held territory and into Russia itself. In this backdrop, the chairman of Ukraine's state railway company stated that Russian forces had struck 5 railway stations in central and western Ukraine. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said during an unannounced trip to Kyiv on yesterday that US diplomats would return to Ukraine this week. Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin traveled to the Ukrainian capital where they met with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials for an extended, roughly 90-minute bilateral meeting, making them the highest-level US officials to have traveled to the country since Russian invasion began in the late February.
And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.